Oh man, usually in a week on SFR, we have one, maybe two headline issues, and then a number of other things to talk about because they're interesting. I'm looking at our agenda this week. There's at least five things that could be headliners in a given week. This is going to be a juicy week, and I already know that there's some details you're going to learn on this podcast this week that you haven't heard anywhere else, some inside baseball. So I'm pretty excited. So let's get right into it. Let me introduce our panel for the week. We have State Senator Terri Bryant from the 58th District. She's the assistant minority leader. She was a state rep prior to that. She also worked at the Department of Corrections for 20 years. And I just learned, came into the General Assembly at the same time as Mark did. So, Terri, how's it going?
Going great. Actually, it's really good weather here in deep southern Illinois. I think we'll probably talk energy at some point. I just left a ribbon cutting for a company named Prysmian, who makes like all of the cables that we have to have for our substations, if you have solar, to do upgrades for the grid, and also for all of our data centers and stuff. So they've expanded, almost doubled their size, and they think they're just going to keep on building going
Wow.
forward. So it's been a great day.
All right, cool. Well, I'm glad you've got good weather. I've got space heaters galore up here so I could smoke a cigar. So not so great up here, but certainly since I'm happy you have good weather, I won't complain about it.
Thank you. I got to deer hunt this morning too. So
Oh,
that's,
it's a
it's
busy day.
bow season. No one should give me a hard time because remember last year during bow season, I cut off half of my thumb with my crossbow. So I was new then. This year I'm in year two. So like my kids told me if I cut off any more appendages, they're going to put me in a home. So I'm trying not to cut off any appendages this year.
Listen, you know I love you, but there's also a reason why I haven't gone hunting with you because I don't want to get Dick Cheneyed. So,
That's right.
Let me introduce the rest of our panel here. We've got Mark Batinick, former House Republican floor leader. He's also a pollster and a senior fellow with the Illinois Policy Institute and a frequent guest. Mark, what's going on, man?
You forgot the most important part of my introduction. I am 5'11", 6'5" with the afro. We'll see who gets that. Apparently you didn't.
Yeah, well, I don't get out much, but I saw the Fletch jersey at least. At least I know where that is, but maybe I just don't remember the reference. All right, we also have, as always, Michael and Chris and Michael. We got a lot to get to this week, guys, so I've got nothing funny, nothing interesting to introduce you guys. Just say hello and let's go.
Hey, let's get after it.
Petitions, 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 petitions. It's the only words I know.
Yeah, I get it. All right, well, before we get into our political topics for the week, we, of course, have to start here. As we record this on Thursday, last night and this morning, news broke about a tragic helicopter crash in Montana where just an awful situation where Darren and Cindy Bailey's son, Zach, their daughter-in-law Kelsey, and then two of their young children, Vada Rose and Samuel, were killed in the helicopter crash. Just an awful situation. So we've got to start with giving our condolences to the family. They're in our prayers. Certainly no one should have to go through this. No parent should have to bury their child. No parent should have to bury their grandchild. And especially to Finn, the third child of the family who was not on a helicopter, who just lost his parents and siblings. That poor kid, 10 years old, just heartbreaking. So if anyone else has condolences they wish to share, feel free.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in, Collin, because, Mark and I both served with Darren in the House, and then I served Darren also in the Senate. Most of the time, he and I agreed on things. We might have approached things a little differently, but I would tell you, I almost lost my son when he was 9 years old in a four-wheeler accident, and it changes your perspective on the world when you almost lose a child. So I cannot even imagine the pain that entire family is going through right now. For those who listen to the show and know Rick and I, they'll know we are prayer warriors. So we're praying for the Bailey family and for Kelsey's family as well in this terrible loss. So thank you for mentioning them today.
Yeah, thanks for kicking that off at the top. I mean, as a new grandfather, I can't even imagine. And there's definitely a switch you have in life when you get to the grandfather stage and have another one on the way. And faith and family are important to Darren, obviously. He was certainly close, really close with his family and really close with his faith. So that's going to be devastating. Hopefully his faith can carry him through this. But gut wrenching, my condolences. And it's, when I woke up to the news and saw it, I just sat stunned, stunned, silent. And, so, God bless him, prayers, and, just a tragedy.
Yeah, just a terrible, terrible situation, terrible news this morning. And I know all of us will be praying for the family and, you know, keep them in our thoughts because it's just, I can't even imagine.
I think we get bogged down in politics and we get numb to humanity sometimes. But one thing to remember in the political game is that we're all human beings here. We all have souls, we all have emotions, we all have feelings. And Darren Bailey deserves our concern. His whole family deserves our prayers. So I extend my warmest wishes, condolences, and prayers for the Bailey family during this time.
All right, with that, obviously, that's the most important thing we're going to talk about this week. We are a political podcast, so we're going to get into politics. We're going to jump to that. That does not in any way diminish what the Bailey family is going through. But we've got multiple topics even this week talking about the governor's race. We got to talk about it. So I'm going to encourage our panel to continue to talk politics, continue to do what we do, while, of course, we keep the Bailey family in our prayers. So I'm going to move us along here to our political topics and get into the first one, which is one I don't think anybody was ready for or expecting. We started hearing word about this last week, and I don't think even believed it back then. But here we are. We have a new entrant into the Republican gubernatorial race. If you're thinking it's late, it's because it is. Petitions start getting filed on Monday. So it's a bit late, right? I mean, what we got, you have just over a week and a half now to get these signatures you need to get on the ballot. Who is he? He's Rick Heidner. He is described as a video gambling mogul. He's a commercial real estate developer, founder of Gold Rush Gaming, and he's running as a Republican. We'll talk about that in a second. There's a lot of questions about why would he do this. There's a lot of bad blood between him and JB Pritzker. We could get into the story, but you're, of course, just welcome to Google it. There's a lot of bad blood between those two. So a lot of people are thinking maybe that's the reason. Chris and I are going to share some thoughts here in a second of maybe there's a different reason. But this is an individual with a lot of money. He's already put $1 million into the race, already started petition signatures. His running mate is Homer Glen Mayor Christina Nitsky Troika. I hope I said that right. I think I'm pretty close.
Nitsky Troika.
Nitsky
Troika. Oh, I was pretty close. There's going to be some problems here for him. Let's talk about the negatives. He has donated a lot of money to mostly Democrats, some Republicans, to be fair, but he's given money to Brandon Johnson. He's given money to Mike Madigan, Don Harmon, Tony Preckwinkle, Cullerton, Kim Fox,
Marie Newman,
Arroyo.
Marie Newman.
What's that?
Marie Newman. Don't forget Marie
Newman. Some Republicans like Richard Irvin, the McHenry County GOPAC. He's definitely spread the money around, but it's to a lot of Democrats, and that's certainly going to hurt him in a Republican primary election. He also has a lot of things in his past just on the gaming side, whether it's accusations of mob ties, legal troubles, financial things that are in the news. There's a lot here that are potentially going to come to light that make it hard to believe that there's much of a path to victory here. But there's a few quick details we want to give you before we finally open it up. Chris, you've got some inside information on just what led to this point, and I don't know. Go ahead. I don't want to steal your thunder, so go ahead.
So the last week of my life, since I first heard at the Will County Republican Central Committee meeting that Rick Heidner was running for governor, my phone's been blowing up with text messages, with phone calls about what the heck is going on. So here's the rundown, okay? So Brett Corrigan, who was Darren Bailey's driver, now runs the State of Illinois PAC, who's done a bunch of fundraisers in the northwest suburbs, Donald Trump Jr., Kerry Lake, what have you. They're in charge of that. And a few weeks ago, he put money into funding Darren Bailey.
Hey, listen, I didn't steal your thunder. Don't steal my thunder. Skip past that.
No, I'm just telling. So Brett Corrigan was with Darren Bailey. Now he's with Rick Heidner. So Heidner Heidner and his people start calling around. They're looking for a lieutenant governor. And originally they landed on Christina Clausen, the Will County GOP.
Well, I thought it was a pretty interesting choice, by the way.
Yeah, I thought pretty interesting choice too. She's a grassroots conservative. I thought she would have given him a lot of clearance on some of the stuff that Collin's already talked about, donations to Democrats and whatnot. She ultimately decided, after initially saying that she was going to do it, she then said she was not going to do it for a myriad of reasons. Okay? So then they go through the Rolodex and look for people, and they landed on Knightsky Troiki, the mayor of Homer Glen. Now, up until this point, the question everybody has is, how the heck is this guy going to get on the ballot? Okay? Now, everybody in the state's thinking this guy's going to start paying hand over fist for signatures to try and get on the ballot over the course of, he announced on Tuesday, I believe. So over the course of 13 days, he's got to start charging hand over fist to get on the ballot. Now, the word on the street is that they are offering circulators $10 a signature. But they're also hearing that he's getting charged between $20 and $30 a signature for these petitions. So someone may be taking some money off the top here to try and get Rick Heidner on the ballot. Okay? That's what the streets say. And the way I see things is that I don't understand how somebody as wealthy as Rick Heidner, somebody who has played the game as impeccably as Rick Heidner has done over the course of the last decade plus, all the donations you see, the Democrats, that's the game. Okay, Rick Heidner is a businessman. He's playing the game. So now Rick Heidner wants to jump in the governor's race. He doesn't call Republicans. He doesn't call up the influencers. He doesn't call up the party and ask them if you should run. He's just, I'm running. This is my running mate. Get me on the ballot. And I think it's so strange that, again, someone as influential and successful as Rick Heidner is taking his political advice from a 21-year-old, I'm not sure specifically how old Brett is, he's around that age, called 21-year-old, who was Darren Bailey's driver. If all you have to do is be a driver for a statewide Republican campaign in this state and be the campaign manager for a multi-million-dollar operation, well, I'm going to call Don Tracy's driver and tell him he's getting a promotion. Brady, if you're
Tracy's
watching
got a good driver, so yeah, maybe.
Brady, if you're watching this, apparently you are capable of running a multi-million-dollar operation and just making money hand over fist from a multi-millionaire.
And let me give you the other half of this so we can let the rest of our panel speak, Chris. But I think your point is there are some financial questions here as to, because if people in the street are getting $10 a signature, but the guy at the top is charging his candidate $25 to $30, somebody's scamming. So there's a conversation there to be had for sure. The other conversation is this. So let's talk about the strategy. We've heard the reasons why this is happening, that, there's just bad blood between Pritzker and Heidner, which is true. There is bad blood. But let's dig more into what this is, because as Chris mentioned and started to go into, you've got the chairman and treasurer of Heidner's PAC are the same as the chairman and treasurer of the Save Illinois PAC. It's Brett Corrigan and it's Michael Miller. That's the chairman and treasurer for both PACs. As you'll remember, the Save Illinois PAC paid for Darren Bailey's announcement not that long ago, and has been pushing Darren Bailey. So this is not that difficult to connect the dots to see. I don't know if the real reason here is the bad blood. Maybe that's the reason for Heidner to do it. But the real reason why Corrigan and those around him are pushing this forward is they must believe it helps Darren Bailey. This is clearly some sort of coordinated effort, because otherwise, why would this be happening? Why would they be pushing forward Heidner? I believe that they've thought strategically, and they've realized that if Heidner is going to take votes from anywhere, he's probably going to take them from Northern Illinois, which hurts Dabrowski more than it hurts anybody else. Darren Bailey owns Central, Southern, Western Illinois. He skates through the primary. That seems not that difficult to connect those dots here, especially when you consider it's the same players. on both committees. When you consider that the fundraiser with Don Jr., no one's picked this up yet. The fundraiser with Don Jr. that has been in the news that we're going to talk about next, that was at Heidner's home in Barrington Hills. Bailey was there. This has been orchestrated for a while here, at least by certain people. Maybe not by Heidner. Maybe he's getting played. I hope he's not, but honestly, there are some signs here that maybe the dude's just getting played here. But ultimately, this seems like a strategy to benefit the Bailey campaign. Someone disagrees, go for it. But that's at least my theory here. Now let's finally let everybody else speak.
The one thing
You
that
want to jump in, Terry, or go ahead, Michael?
Oh no, the one thing that I would say kind of against your theory is that, if the plan is get this guy on the ballot because he's going to siphon off votes and Bailey will have an easier path, then why did they start, 14 days out? You think they would have started earlier and had a lieutenant governor and, been getting those signatures.
It's possible, but remember, Bailey didn't get started that long ago either. I mean, some of these things take time to pull together, and they've just been trying to get on the ballot.
One of the rumors that I was hearing, and I had gotten some calls and even to talk to Darren myself a couple of weeks ago because he had called me and he said he had made a comment that Jose was going to be involved, but not in the same capacity as in previous elections because I know that was a point of contention for a lot of people because they kind of blamed Jose for some of the issues with those subsequent Bailey campaigns. And I was told yesterday by somebody that had communicated with the Heidner campaign that was part of the justification for this because Brett agreed to help Darren with the understanding that Jose was not going to be involved, at least in the same capacity. Obviously, from everything that we've heard and seen, that doesn't seem to be true. Jose is, running the campaign. So that was maybe part of the reason why this happened like it did.
Okay, it's possible.
Mark, I'll just jump in really quick. I don't have any strategy. The thought came to me when I think Chris said something about gangster or whatever's in the past. And the thought came to me that someone said to me one time that the reason that Illinois keeps having governors go to prison and we don't change our behavior on ethics is because Illinois loves its gangsters. This is the home of Al Capone. So, I mean, I don't know what his reasoning is behind it, but there's a part of me that just unfortunately believes that Illinois as a whole gets intrigued by certain, rumors about people, and I don't think that it is a negative. It probably would serve as a positive for the candidate.
It's an interesting take.
Financial questions around the campaign, Collin. Really, you're surprised that there's financial questions around the campaign.
Yeah, true.
That's pretty much. I mean, it seems like most of the campaigns have something where somebody's either grifting, they're telling their candidate they have a chance to win when they don't, so that they can keep a gig, or being overcharged, or paying double for mail rates, whatever it is. That doesn't surprise me. It would seem odd that you could somehow dupe a billionaire into putting his whole life out there in the public to run for governor in some part of some 3D chess sort of thing. That seems. I don't know. It seems a little bit like a stretch. I can tell you that I know Christina Nitschke, the LG candidate. I haven't spoken with her in years, but I knew her years ago. I think that's actually pretty solid. That's a pretty solid choice there. Probably one of the better choices that we've seen over the years. So he picked a good.
That's a high bar to clear, but yeah.
Agreed. But yeah, this whole cycle has me scratching my head. You've got people who are with Bailey, with Dabrowski now. You got people that were Bailey that are supposedly with Heidner now, and you have people that maybe didn't like Bailey that are back with Bailey this time. It is an absolute head scratcher. This is almost like college sports now, where everybody went into the portal and picked a new team completely. I don't know how this all shakes out.
I mean, it's a good analogy. And listen, I think especially hearing what I heard from you, Michael, that maybe I'm not right on my theory here. But ultimately, there's shenanigans all around on this one. I mean, that's what's clear. And Mark, you're right. Should I be shocked that there's you brought up that there's just all sorts of financial troubles when we talk about how consultants tend to play the game right now in politics, especially in Illinois. But there's also just those financial troubles around Heidner. So this is not a new thing even for him. So I guess I shouldn't be shocked that there's financial potential impropriety already.
Yeah, and just some people also need to eat, want to eat, and it wouldn't be surprising that allegiance would be switched just simply because they were offered a better deal. For a lot of people, it's a job, and their allegiance is going to change, based on that. But it's a strange cycle.
Yeah, that is for sure.
Yeah, so I in the 58th Senate district, I picked up 4 counties that were previously Darren Bailey's counties, and it's a little. I do like 52 parades a year because this district is so big. And even and I'm not exaggerating. I mean, I probably have more than that, but the feeling is different in those 4 counties than they were 2 years ago, where people were solidly behind Darren. I actually heard not too long ago someone say that they didn't know the guy's name. They just said, I'm going to vote for that sheriff from DuPage. And they specifically said because it's dangerous. Not dangerous like someone's going to hurt them, but just dangerous because a lot of people are related in these more rural areas. They didn't want to vote for Darren again. So the guy said, I'm going to wear his T-shirt, I'm going to wear his hat, and then I'm going to vote for that sheriff from up in DuPage. And so there's and I think we're going to see, not just in that race, but I think we're going to see some of the races when they're doing polling. I don't think the polling is going to turn out right, because it's a little bit like back in when Trump ran the first time, and I was in Union County, which was really hardcore Democrat. You knock on the door and people would whisper, hey, I can't put a sign in my yard, but I'm going to vote for Trump. And then Trump wins that county with 78% in a Democrat county. So I have a little bit of a feeling that some of the pollsters are going to get very surprised about what happens, whether it happens to be the new guy, the old guy, the guy who's been around for a while, the one who's new on the scene. I just think it's going to be very hard to poll this race.
Interesting. Well, we're going to find out. We're still talking the Gov's race in our next topic. So let me just move us along. And because this one, if you think we're done with weird and interesting topics, you've seen nothing yet. So we mentioned that fundraiser that happened in Barrington Hills. We talked about this last week and maybe even the week before about how Brett Corrigan and Michael Miller and some others for their PAC hosted a fundraiser in Barrington Hills at Heidner's home, where money was raised for what we were all told was for the congressionals and to elect Republicans. Turns out that money was then spent on Darren Bailey's kickoff event. Now it seems that has changed, which if you're just tuning in here, go to the last topic if you missed. So that was where this all started. And so the Dabrowski campaign started pushing on that. And obviously Dan Proft and Jeannie Ives are very involved in Ted's campaign. Well, Proft has we in the business call them the Proft Papers, even though they're really Tim Ponies, but we just call them the Proft Papers. And one of those outlets put out a story about this, about Bailey and this PAC spending money on Bailey's announcement and how they felt that it was improper, which I think they have a decent point there. But then at the very bottom, this is where things got weird. At the very bottom, they started to talk about the situation with Corrigan, about how he had some beefs, if you will, with the Bailey campaign at the end of 2022, had drafted up a lawsuit with his attorney, Scott Casper, and that lawsuit was never filed, but there was a lot of salacious things in that lawsuit, and they linked to it in this article. Now, I got to be real. I didn't think that was that was new. I'd seen, I'm pretty sure I'd seen that lawsuit a long time ago. So it wasn't new to me, but I guess it was new to the public because lots of people were like, holy cow, this was privileged information which was released, which the lawsuit was never filed. So there certainly is an argument to be had there. But that lawsuit was, and you can certainly look it up, and if you guys want to talk about it, you're welcome to, but there's a lot in there that if you're running for governor, you don't want that out. If you read it in a positive light, and if you read it with some understanding that, of course, one side's going to say things as salaciously as possible, you might say, okay, there's some icky things things in there, but I can get over it. But if you read it as somebody who's drafting a television ad in the general election to defeat Darren Bailey, there's some juicy things in there that will not look good in a TV ad. So there's the reason why suddenly this all exploded. Suddenly Illinois Review is going after Jeannie Ives and Dabrowski. Tom DeVore jumps in and says Jeannie Ives is going after a minor. Then suddenly, for some reason, the Dabrowski campaign hosts a press conference for Jeannie. I don't know why they hosted it for her, because Ted just said no comment, basically, and then let Jeannie defend herself, and then they stopped. The Tribune, frankly, said this right. They haven't said much right for a while, but they said this right, that they said that the race is already spiraling. We have not even filed petitions yet, and this thing's gotten nasty. Now IR is attacking Dabrowski and Bailey over Dabrowski over Plummer's ties to the Dodgers, and this thing is just already spiraling, and the race basically hasn't even begun. So curious everybody's thoughts, but this thing's already getting nasty, and it's not even started yet, really.
I didn't have Dodgers on my bingo card.
Right?
I don't know what that die is.
I mean, if you live down by Michael, you probably did, because the Bailey crew has tried to use this against Plummer before, so it's not necessarily new. But yeah, it's not something we all expected in October.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting cycle at the top.
Is that it? Are you going to be that diplomatic, Mark? Come on.
I mean, well, I can't even make sense of it. It's even hard for me to keep track of the players and what team everybody's on. It's obviously not good. It's my biggest concern. Look, it's a long shot at the top of the ticket. I think I've said this. I said this on the radio recently. I've said it before. JB is going so far left to make himself attractive to the presidential Democratic primary voter. It's hurting him at home. So I think that his likability numbers, and we've seen it, have dropped at home. However, right now we're not taking advantage of that, right? We have candidates that aren't shooting their arrows at JB, which is what they should all be doing. And the one who's doing the best job at throwing the arrows at JB should be the one that comes out of the primary. They're just shooting at each other, and it's not helpful at all. I mean, like I said, diplomatic or not, it's hard for me to even make sense of the whole thing. If anybody watched the first few seasons of House of Cards, and you thought it was like crazy, I mean, we're into that kind of realm. We're like, is that really real? What's going on? I mean, between the billionaire with gambling and all the accusations that he has, and then this lawsuit, and then the stuff with people switching sides and the Dodgers, apparently. I mean, it's quite the drama. I don't think Republicans in general, we've obviously gotten used to more drama the last 8-9 years or so, but especially Illinois Republican primary voters, we're used to a little bit more, even keel stuff. So I don't know. It's not good for us.
Mark, I'll see you the House of Cards reference, and just real quick, I'll raise you and say, actually, I think it's more like the last season of House of Cards, which was like the worst season of television in the history of television.
Ever.
Like, that's how I feel about this race. It's actually more like the last season, where it was like, are we seriously watching this? And did you really just ruin one of the best TV shows out there? Like, that's how I feel. Terry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, to me, it seems like we have a lot of novice candidates for the level that they're running at. So that one of the hardest things to get candidates to do when you're trying to consult with them, or if you're trying to lead them in the right direction, is to stay focused. So the enemy is JB Pritzker. I agree with Mark. I think the person that focuses on JB Pritzker, everything that he's done to this state, and what their plan is to turn things around, should come out the winner. And fortunately, I think because these are really immature, I don't mean immature individuals, but immature at running at something at such a high level, that they just can't seem to stay focused on the task at hand. There are things that you let slide that you don't comment on. There are things that you comment on with a smile, and I'm sorry, that seems like that's your problem, not mine, right? And then you focus on the enemy. And in this case, the enemy is JB Pritzker.
So I just want to dovetail on that, Terry. I think you hit the nail on top. This is why I think to date, Darren Bailey's run the best campaign, best raw. It's not like this incredible thing with all this money and this great push behind it. But I think Ted has stumbled again and again and again. The Heidner rollout, no rollout. This isn't how I would roll out. If I was a billionaire, I'd probably have a
Right.
comms person on staff and at least have some statements like more to come, put some dates, put some markers out there, something. Mendrick seems like a really nice guy. His announcement was a rambling thing on Facebook. I mean, it's most an organized state rep rollout is stronger than those three. And I think that's where the experience, I think one of the things that I said about Ted early on was he's never run for this sort of thing before, so he doesn't know what he doesn't know. And I think that's kind of showing up in the race.
Yeah,
I think the other thing is,
I think the term I always use is political amateurs. I mean, we see this now in this era of the party where we're against anybody with experience. And Mark and I just talked about it, that there are a lot of consultants out there who are sleazy. And so we admit it that yes, our field has some problems, but that doesn't mean you throw everybody out with experience. As some of us have been toiling to do things the right way for a very, very long time. And you know what? Experience is a good thing. You don't go ask a surgeon who's never performed surgery before to do your open heart surgery. Like if you want to run for governor against a billionaire who's pretty smart politically in Pritzker, you're probably going to need more than just a couple of amateurs running the show. But right now, I think anybody with a brain's looking at this field and going, this is the best we can do. And in the year where Pritzker is finally vulnerable, this is the best we got.
well, I think the other thing too is, even though I don't particularly like Darren's ticket, he has the most balanced ticket. So I may not agree with how it looks, but the other people who are running have a very suburban centric ticket. And for someone who's in deep Southern Illinois, that is really frustrating. And I'm hearing a lot about it. So
Chris, you've been trying to jump in. Let's go, man. Go for it.
Yeah, I had a long rambling here about how all of this is a sign of like an unserious political party. And then I was going to go into how this is like a sign of an unserious political process. But I'm going to just, completely shelf both of those things and talk about how one of the things I've been talking about for a long time is the unseriousness of campaigns. And everybody, myself included, likes to bemoan the Rauner days and how stupid of a governor Bruce Rauner was, and oh dear God, he got destroyed in 2018. Whatever. One thing I'll say about Bruce Rauner, no matter what you think about him, no matter what you think about his staff or his consultants, the Bruce Rauner operation and the Republican Party at the time was a serious operation. Okay, was it done the most effective way? No, but there was money, there were consultants, there was staff. They were trying to build something up.
There was a strategy. There was a plan.
People
stayed
came
on
up
message,
with,
stayed on message, stayed on
Right.
message.
Right.
People
What was
came
it?
up through the
Focus,
ranks.
Amanda. Focused.
Right. You don't have that anymore. Referring back to the Heidner stuff, Darren Bailey's driver is running a multi-million-dollar race for governor. In no state, in no country on this earth would that ever be considered a good thing. Okay? That is not the sign of a healthy political party. It's not the sign of a healthy political process whatsoever. So when you don't have serious people in the room, when you don't have infrastructure or an apparatus, that's what leads to things happening like we're going to leak this draft lawsuit about Darren Bailey and Brett Corrigan and a bunch of stuff that we're not going to repeat on this podcast because this is a family show, everybody. There are women present. Like, we are not going to say those things. That's stuff you do when the good idea fairy hits you a week before Election Day. And you're desperate and you really need some type of ticking time bomb. So you're going to drop this thing and who knows where it came from? Who knows what the purpose of it was? But you don't do that before you even file the damn petitions. And this much drama shouldn't be happening over the race for Illinois governor Republican nomination. The rest of the country's laughing at us because everybody's, yelling at each other over Brett Corrigan and the Darren Bailey staff sexual habits right now. Like that's ridiculous. Fiction writers will reject all of this as unbelievable. And we're supposed to sit here and talk about all this stuff like it's serious, like it's important. And it's, at the end of the day, it's nonsense. People around the country are laughing at Illinois because this is what we have to show for as a Republican Party.
Well, and I think what we're just lacking all around right now on this primary for governor is discipline, and that's what we desperately need it. The first thing you got to do is, win the Republican primary. The second thing you have to do is, win the general election in November. And here we are, these campaigns are not talking about their opponent on the Republican side or the Republican or the Democrat, JB Pritzker. They're not talking about them. They're talking about, oh, well, Jason Plummer did this and Jeannie Ives did that and Brett Corrigan did this and Brett Corrigan wrote that. And it's like Jason Plummer, Jeannie Ives, Brett Corrigan, none of them are going to be on the ballot. Focus on what really matters here and prove that you're the guy to run against JB and that you have a path to beating him. That's what we need to be talking about.
Well, it
Not
reeks
a
of
B
high school.
from 2022 or a B from 2017,
Right.
Yeah. However far back you want to go.
It's a great point, Michael. I mean, it reeks of high school drama. I mean, I think, and when we talk about this field, we talk about how this attack was done. You guys said it really well. This is not what you do this early. This is, we see this all the time. Those of us there's 4 of us here who've all run a bunch of campaigns, and Terry, you've been in a bunch of campaigns. We've all seen it where somebody wakes up and has a brilliant idea, and you need experienced people around the table to say, hold your horses, don't do that. That is not a good idea. But right now you look at the Dabrowski campaign, you say, who is there? Who's the adult in the room who says, no, actually, that's not a good idea. Don't put that out. That is going to hurt you and hurt the party, probably more than it even hurts Darren Bailey. Because like I said, I've seen the lawsuit. I guarantee you Pritzker already had it. That's one of the reasons why I and many people said that Darren Bailey as our nominee has some problems here that could hurt the party down ballot. This lawsuit was one of those reasons. I've known about it. Guarantee you Pritzker's known about it. So I don't think this changes the race, but it changes things for Dabrowski. I mean, the dude had to hold a press conference, which, by the way, it's the first one he's held in like a month, and it was for 10 minutes, and it was about Jeannie Ives' drama, not about how he's going to beat Pritzker, not about how he's the better candidate, not about any of that, but about this high school drama. That's what the press conference was about. This is where we are, and it really, number one, makes a lot of us nervous that we're going to waste this opportunity to potentially defeat JB Pritzker. It makes a lot of us really nervous about the damage this is going to do down ballot, because we've got great Republicans who are putting their lives and reputations on the line to run for state senate, state representative, county office, judicial office. And if you've got a horrible candidate at the top of the ticket, I mean, thank God we've got Tracy, who's an adult in the room in the Senate race. But for the governor's race, if you've got somebody there who's not serious, that's going to hurt us down ticket, and that's going to hurt Republicans even more than we're already hurt in the state. There's a reason why we've been screaming about this race now for months, and it's unfortunately proving us right here that we don't have a serious candidate right now in this race. And I think the last thing we'll talk about, just as a final sort of anyone else has thoughts on the governor's race, let's just bring this up since it's the last thing we'll talk about here. The Northwest Suburban Lincoln Day dinner was on Monday. They did a straw poll, and it was basically in Del Mar's backyard, so I didn't even really pay attention to it. I saw Aaron do a little bit of campaigning, trying to get people to choose their ticket. So I was a bit shocked when I saw that Dabrowski won it. I've heard it said it was 53-33. I also heard them say it was 55-35. So I don't know which is true, but basically Dabrowski won the straw poll by 20. It's just a straw poll. It's just one thing. But right there in Northwest Cook County, when I think the Bailey campaign has kind of been counting on doing really well in Cook County, I thought that was kind of a surprise. They also did the Senate race. Don Tracy had 52% there. The closest was John Goodman at 19. Again, proving we have one serious candidate in the Senate race, which, by the way, we don't have time this week, but we'll talk more about that in future weeks, because there's a candidate right now out there paying people from California so they could try to get on the ballot for the U.S. Senate race. So we'll talk about that soon. But any final thoughts on the Gov race here? Especially, I mean, I don't know if you care about the straw poll, but I figured I'd put that out in case anybody does.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that have the Ted Dabrowski is getting, I'll call him the grass tops. He's getting the anti-Bailey grass top vote. That's what he's getting. I'll be interested to see how people feel a month or two down the road about his campaign and whether it, straightens up, does a little better than it's been doing, or if he flounders a little bit.
Well, they finally had, I mean, I don't know if you saw this, Mark, but we've talked about how in A1s, after the 1.5 million was raised, we were saying, what's next? And there's been no A1s, no A1s. There was an A1 yesterday. I don't know if you guys saw for Dabrowski. So I was excited to open it up and see, yay, another A1, and it was for $1,000. So we're still waiting to see, is there going to be a real apparatus here, a real fundraising machine, a real campaign? A single $1,000 A1 contribution is not going to cut it.
I have one final thought on the gov race. Judging from how things have played out this week, there is still time, everyone. I propose to save everybody's ass here. Mark Batinick for governor, Terri Bryant for light gov, a winning ticket. A serious ticket. We can do it,
Terry,
guys.
is that why you cut your hair? You didn't want your running mate to be jealous?
I'm in, Mark. I would run.
Yeah,
I would run
me
anywhere
too.
with
See, we
Mark
can do
Batinick
it, guys.
anytime.
I'll have Ryan draft the petition. I'll call up my circulators. I'll give you a discount, $20 a sig. Don't ask how much I'm paying the circulators, guys, but we can do it. We can save the Illinois Republican Party. We just need a couple brave people to step up.
Well, I think I said earlier there were two questions. I only gave you one of them. The second question that I had was, you mentioned save the Illinois Republican Party. I mean, is it savable is a question I've got, but we'll save that for a different week. I'm a little bit frustrated and depressed, I'll admit. But let's keep us moving, because I know I didn't say it before, but one of our guests here, Mark, has a hard stop time soon, so I want to let him talk about some of our next couple topics here. Let's talk about, again, another what would have been a headline in a normal week for this show. The political landscape just changed bigly. The Stacy Davis Gates of CTU infamy is now the head of the Illinois Federation of Teachers. Now, for those who don't follow this level of politics very closely, understand that IFT and IEA are two very different state teacher unions in the state. IFT has always been the more progressive of the unions, if you will, but they were never this progressive. Stacy Davis Gates taking over, the CTU basically taking over the State Federation of Teachers. They're the smaller of the two, to be clear, but this is a huge thing in Illinois politics. She is even to the left of J.B. Pritzker, which, as Mark talked about, is actually really hard to do nowadays. And there's a beef between her and Pritzker. And as proof of this, they're already planning next Wednesday during veto session to be down there protesting and picketing and everything else, because they want their multiple billions of dollars that the state apparently has laying around. So this is a big deal. Open it up to you guys for your thoughts on what this might mean for politics.
I don't think this is really good, obviously.
For the state, yeah.
It's interesting because the IFT, my wife is an administrator at a school district. She's not in the union, but it happens to be, most suburban schools are IEA. Hers happens to be the IFT. And they're in the middle of strike negotiations right now. They were about to strike, then they had an agreement, then the agreement got turned down. They might strike again. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm just going to maybe talk about this a little bit, have a longer rant on it, but Ted really likes to talk about the consolidation of school districts and how that would lower property taxes, apparently.
Magically?
Magically. And I like to push back and say, what's the biggest, largest, most consolidated school district in the state, and how are they doing from an efficiency standpoint? And what would happen is you would have 30 CTUs, 30 Stacy Davis Gateses. With you would start consolidating powerful. There's a huge downside. These things are magically easy to say, but the reality of how the other rules in Illinois would affect that, I don't think I think that's actually a pretty big loser for the state, not a winner.
Well, and I think people need Terry,
go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think people need a reminder of how radical Stacy Davis Gates is and some of the quotes that she said, especially related to private schools, saying that, those private schools are the choice of racist and it's Jim Crow in 2020. Meanwhile, she's sending her son to a private school, right? So she's pretty far out there. It's not what we're used
to. Michael, honestly, I thought you were going to go do a rundown. Like, there's probably 20 quotes.
There's probably more than that, but that's a bad one.
Yeah, it puts some of us deep downstaters in a little bit of a trick box too, because IFT in Southern Illinois is IDOT employees, believe it or not. So you've got like universities have some Teamsters, they have IEA, they have laborers and so forth. But I think in the 14 counties I have, I might have literally maybe a total of 60 IFT teachers. Everyone else that I have, I think, is IDOT. And so we've talked
about in the past that it's been really frustrating for those of us who are not reflexively anti-union as Republicans, where there are working families. My brother-in-law was a union member for a long time. Like, there are working families that are union households that are absolutely Republican voters. So I think there's a lot of us who have encouraged Republicans to work with some of the unions, not all of them. But then we said, we saw last week or the week before, I think, where you saw the unions pull out of the agreed bill process. And now here we go. IFT's elevated Stacy Davis Gates. It becomes really difficult for people like us to be like, oh yeah, let's work with these unions. You can't work with Stacy Davis Gates. You can't work with ASME and some of this stuff when they're going far left. So, I mean, thankfully IEA has remained, at least a little more towards the center. But honestly, this is going to be a problem for Illinois, for politics, for everybody. I mean, this is declaring war basically if you're IFT, and it's not good for anybody.
Well, and here, we haven't talked about it yet, but St. Clair County, Cahokia School District is IFT. And if you go to their Facebook page, I mean, they've been posting negative things about Chris Belt and Senator Chris Belt and his wife for 50 days straight. I mean, it is wild what's going on.
Wow. Well, we'll be following it. We'll be talking about it. Let's go to this. Again, another thing that is interesting to our audience and may have been a headline issue as I continue to fight this stupid sun going straight onto my face. It looks super professional, but whatever. Another thing that could have been a headline issue is texts were between J.B. Pritzker and John Curran and Tony McCombie were the issue of a Tribune article where, as we've heard before, when J.B. Pritzker was up in Minnesota, he made the claim that, he asked McCombie and Curran to denounce political violence after somebody did a video in front of his house, which we talked about was completely blown out of proportion, but I'll get to that in a minute. And, he said both of them refused and neither of them have ever been willing to speak out on political violence. And Curran did a joint statement with Don Harmon. McCombie has come out against political violence. So it was all just a play by Pritzker to try to make Republicans look bad by our extremely hyper-partisan governor. Well, those text messages are now out. And if you're interested, we don't have a lot of time here to really dive into specifically the text, but basically Pritzker demands both Curran and McCombie that they immediately come out and denounce political violence. And McCombie rightfully says, yeah, okay, I'd like you to denounce a lot of the things you've said then, because Pritzker has made some incredibly incendiary comments over the last, I don't know, however many years, let alone months. And then Pritzker had a pretty short retort back to her. And of course was never going to do that. It was all just a thing to let him get some press. And I want to get into for a sec after everyone gets a chance to give their thoughts. I think this opens up an interesting conversation about the different approaches by each of the caucuses on how they handle Pritzker and how they handle certain issues. But first, just if anybody has thoughts on just the exchange of, Pritzker making these demands and of course using it for political gain, when both Republican leaders have denounced violence repeatedly in politics.
I mean, I just think it makes Pritzker look like the fool that he is, right? I mean, you've got McCombie, Harmon, Curran, all of them repeatedly, putting out statements condemning political violence. When the lawmakers in Minnesota, when that situation happened, Charlie Kirk, they condemned, and then now Pritzker's acting like, oh, I never saw anything. You never did that. Well, Pritzker, you can tone your rhetoric down too.
Yeah. Yeah, no Republicans out there, like the Senate or House leader aren't out there comparing our opponents to Nazis. We're not saying a lot of the things that Pritzker's saying, but yeah, sure, we need to tone down our rhetoric.
I mean, Republicans should know a moment of peace is somehow that's peaceful protesting. I mean, right. And then the other quote, and I'm gonna paraphrase a little bit here, but he said, man. We had the multiple Nazi references in the
Gestapo references too.
In the state of the state, was it budget address or state of the state? He said something to the effect of, "I'm for political discourse, but not the same political discourse. We have to become street fighters." I don't know what it means when you keep saying Nazis, street fighters, not know a moment of peace, and suddenly say, "Oh, you should denounce this." Backstory on that, just his comments when Charlie Kirk, the day Charlie Kirk was shot, I think were ridiculous and horrendous. He should have been called out for that a little bit more than he needs a mirror. My statement to him would have been, grab a mirror.
Yeah, well,
That
and
would've
I
been my
think that
statement back
the point
then.
you make is the video that this guy, Ben Berkwam, I'm probably saying that wrong, he did in front of his home was actually about what you just talked about. It was after Charlie Kirk's assassination. Pritzker didn't condemn it. I mean, kind of barely did. And then he immediately said it's all Trump's fault. So this guy went in front of his home and said, Pritzker, with all of your security, and pointed out the security cameras and the law enforcement that you've got protecting you. Meanwhile, there's violence on the South Side. The inner city is killing itself. That's his words. And he said, and you're here blaming all this violence on Trump when you wouldn't even denounce the violence against Charlie Kirk. Like, and that was his point. And then, by the way, after he left the house, his final comments, I got the quote right here. His final comments, this individual, when he was no longer in front of Pritzker home, said, if you're not inspired now, I don't know what it's going to take. You better get up. You better get active. We got a country to save. That's what he said. But here's the takeaway. He called for people to take action and attack Pritzker. And, he did it in front of his home. None of that is true. This was completely blown out of proportion. And it was started by the fact that Pritzker wouldn't denounce political violence himself. And yet here he goes being a hypocrite saying, John Curran and Tony McCombie, I demand you put out statements right now because this was done in my home. It hurt me personally. It's like, okay, but what about all the rest of us then?
A few years ago, Representative Stava Murray came over to talk to me and was critical of the fact that I had used the word thug when describing someone the night before. She told me that was very racist and that we shouldn't ever use the word thug. And then, J.B. Pritzker calls Republicans jackbooted thugs. So, there's two sets of rules, and, we're held to one set of rules while J.B. Pritzker and his ilk are held to a totally different set of rules.
No. Well, and the interesting thing here to sort of continue on the discussion of what the topic is here is you see two different approaches. And we've seen this in a lot of ways. This is just one story that is an example where, Curran did do a statement where he did a joint statement with Don Harmon, which was an interesting, it was his take and a lot of people praised it. McCombie has put out her own statements that are similar, but you see a difference in approach. We see it in even since then. You've got McCombie going very hard after the governor, going very hard after Chris Welch. And we've given her and the House Republicans credit for that because, frankly, it's been a long time since we've seen Republicans with a spine in this state want to fight back. Meanwhile, on the Senate side, they've tried very hard to keep it more cordial. And I understand, Terry, that's part of sort of the Senate is more cordial. But I think it's interesting. Our next topic that we'll get to is Don Harmon breaking election law. And it looks like he might skirt, but we'll talk about that in a second. And we've seen very little to no attacks on Harmon for that. Whereas if that was in the House, if that was Welch, we would have seen dozens of press releases going after him for this because he deserves it. Harmon deserves it. But it's interesting to see that there hasn't been that. And now we're seeing sort of the fruits of that labor because right now in John Curran's race, he has one of the two most vulnerable Senate seats in the whole state. And at the moment, he has no Democrat opponent. And so maybe that is the payoff here in the Senate side of play nice. And now Curran will be safe in his seat and the Republicans will save millions of dollars. I can't deny that's a positive outcome from that. I do prefer fighters, so I prefer the House Republican take. But now you see Chris Welch, two times over the last week now, has made posts about, McCombie and Pillowgate and saying, she needs to answer for this and the improper spending. And then he just did it now again, where he said she lacks, I'm reading it now, she lacks ethics and the courage to do what's right. You're seeing two very different approaches and two very different outcomes. Curious what you guys think. It's a wide-ranging topic, but it's, to me, an interesting conversation.
I like Tony's approach, but it might make Curran's got a lot of seats up this time, and not that the House doesn't, but a lot of seats in play. And if he doesn't get an opponent, I do not see Republicans, the generic Republican, winning his district. So he would have had one heck of a fight if he had an opponent, even if the opponent had no money. You might have had an Ann Stava Murray versus I can't even remember who she beat with no money, but
Peter Breen.
Yeah, Breen.
Yeah.
Was it Peter Breen?
No, it wasn't Breen. No, it was
Olson. Olson.
David
It was
Olson.
There we go. That's
Yeah,
a blast.
Olson. So yeah, but it's if you're in the super minority and you're not fighting, I just don't think you're relevant, right? You're just there. You're window dressing.
Yeah, I don't think John Curran I mean, I've served with him now for 6 years. I don't think he thinks about things like, oh, let's play nice because I don't want to get an opponent. That's just not how
His
John thinks.
staff does, but that's definitely not how John thinks.
Maybe, but he's an attorney, and in looking at it, I mean, I believe very strongly that what Harmon did was wrong, but there is also a difference in the Senate in that you have 4-year terms. So I understand the argument that Harmon is making, where in the House it's always a 2-year term, so it's easy to distinguish what was, legislative intent. Because we like to talk a lot about what was the intent, and I think the actual statute was Harmon's bill originally.
Yeah, and we're
So
going to
that's
get
the
into that in
argument.
depth. Yeah, we'll get
Yeah.
into that in depth in our next topic, Terry. I think it's
Okay.
again,
Yeah,
it's
so
your caucus.
I just think it's more of the difference between the Senate being 2 4s and a 2, and really, I don't think anybody wants to stick their neck out too far to find out whether it's supposed to be a 2-year or a 4-year. I don't know. I mean, I think that's been kind of bounced around a little.
Yeah, possible. I mean, listen, I just know from multiple experiences that whether it's, being a guest on our podcast, we've heard back, well, if you guys are a partisan podcast and we don't want to poke the bear, so, we don't want to come on the podcast and anger the Democrats or anger Harmon. I know multiple candidates have been told.
The bear. You can have me anytime. I love to poke the bear.
There you go. We've had multiple candidates who are told, don't attack Pritzker, don't attack Harmon, don't poke the bear. There is definitely a very different approach in the Senate in terms of politically. Again, probably not coming from Curran. It's probably staff driven. I mean, everything I know is staff driven, not Curran driven. But it's definitely a different approach. And I strongly prefer a caucus that's going to fight back like you, Terry, that's going to actually fight back and call out Pritzker and call out Harmon when they're wrong. You're going to have a fight on your hands if you do that, but you're in the super minority. Like at a certain point, how much further can you drop? Maybe it's time to fight back. Maybe it's time to start to try to get out there and win some seats and hold the other side accountable. I don't know. We see this with the business community too. Maybe if you play patty cake with Pritzker, he'll only screw you 90% of the time instead of 100% of the time. But at a certain point, do you stop and say, okay, maybe let's fight for what we know to be right? I don't know. It's me. All right. Seems like we've talked this out. Mark, I want to respect your time. So I know you need to go. If you got any quick thoughts before we move on and lose you, go for it.
I want to hit your next topic. Only in Illinois could you do campaign finance reform that allows the leader to blow the cap, get unlimited money, and then give unlimited money to his handpicked candidates. That only in Illinois can you do campaign reform that consolidates power to leadership. It's a horrible system. They should just blow the tops for everybody. It would be a little bit more fair to actually have some outside competition. Our system right now is just absolutely atrocious. I'm sure it was Madigan designed where, we're going to do campaign reform and just consolidate power. That's number one. Number two, you're talking about this. I'm going to talk about my clown of the week with all the gambling stuff, whether it be Pritzker, what happened today with the NBA, those guys with Billups and Rozier and Damon Jones with the NBA. They're my clown of the week. But anybody who gambles, this is why you don't gamble, because there's people who know what you don't. So unless you're on the inside, you're on the outside. Keep your money in your pocket. I'll see you, folks.
There you go. Thanks, Mark. We'll count that as the official kickoff of our next topic here, which is Don Harmon. We talked about it last week where I was shocked that maybe, just maybe, Harmon would be held responsible. Well, it turns out we spoke too soon because there's 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats on the board, and they were split, they were deadlocked, and it turns out you need 5 votes to do anything. So the belief is now that Harmon is basically going to skirt here, it looks like the board, they've pushed this, so the official decision will be at their next meeting, which I've got the date somewhere in my notes here. I'll get it before the end of the topic. But looks like Chris and I don't know, man. I guess we counted our chickens too soon because seems like Harmon's going to get away with it.
Again, Chris vindicated once again, because I've been saying for the longest time, you can do whatever you want in politics and get away with it. And it was funny. It's so funny to me because you have somebody at the lower level who says, yeah, he should pay the $10 million. Okay. And then you have 4 Democrats on the panel who says, oh, he should pay nothing. That's just such an extreme shift from one to the other. Okay. You'd think in any reasonable government, what would happen is, the 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans on a committee be like, listen, this guy's got to pay something. Maybe it's not 10 million. Maybe it's not 10 million. Maybe it's 5. Maybe it's something like that. But now it seems like the way this works, which is hilarious, the way these loopholes work, is that it's literally just going to be, I'm sorry. And he doesn't even have to say he's sorry.
Yeah.
He's just like, oh, yeah, $10 million fine. You don't got to pay that, buddy. You're okay. But if here's the thing. Let's say Chris was running a race. Let's say Michael Butler's running for state senate, okay? Michael Butler's running for state senate, and he does the same thing. He screws up somehow, okay? Michael Butler would be paying $10 million.
He sent a letter saying don't do something, and he just does it anyways because he doesn't care. Because that's what Harmon did. He was sent a letter. Terry, I want to have you re-give your thoughts because people will miss them if they went straight to this topic in a second. But the reality here is it's not like it was Harmon didn't know. They sent the dude a letter and they send it certified. You can't miss it. So they were told don't do this and did it anyways. Carry on, Chris.
Oh, yeah. So if Michael Butler for Senate does this, then, oh, yeah, $10 million, buddy, pay up. I guarantee you that's what would happen. And even if the hearing officer said Michael Butler pays $10 million, half of the Republicans say no, half the Democrats say yes, they'd find a way to make Michael Butler pay $10 million. The lawyers would all be working overtime. The billable hours would go through the roof to find a way to make Michael Butler pay $10 million. But because it's Don Harmon, it's not because it's Don Harmon, because it's a Democrat, that's why this is happening. You're telling me that on that panel, that there's not one Democrat on that panel who's thinking to themselves, I don't know, maybe this guy's got to pay something. Isn't there one free thinker among the 4 Democrats on that panel? Apparently not. Apparently every Democrat person in all of the government, there's not a single independent thought amongst any of them. That's incredible. They're still stuck in the Madigan days. They're still loyal over here.
Well,
What's wrong with you people?
Speaking of Madigan, I mean, the thing that was kind of missed here in this coverage is Harmon's attorney is Madigan's attorney, Mike Casper, who threatened to sue if any fine were levied against Harmon. That's Madigan's lawyer. That's the Democrats' lawyer who's made it clear that there will be retribution if you vote for this. So that's why not a single one of them was willing to break the party line. But obviously, you talk about a broken system. Terry, I know you this frustrates you all the time. Clearly, whether it's our election law or any other sort of ethics system right now down in Springfield, it's all broken. You could do, as Chris has said, you can basically do whatever you want, especially if there's a D after your name, and you get away with it.
Yeah, so there's a couple thoughts come to my mind. One is I'm a little bit confused about what happens at that next hearing because I thought I read this to be that since it's a 4-4 split, that the appeal actually doesn't go anywhere, that the original finding stays in place. So the $10 million fine. And to me, I thought it looked like they were trying to sort that out so they can decide that at the next hearing, but I might be reading that wrong.
No, the one school of thought is that, and then the other school of thought is in order to levy a fine, they have to take an action. And since they can't get 5 votes for that, they can't take an action to levy the fine. So that's right now what they're squabbling over.
Yeah, so it's a catch-22.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the other thing is I'm not sure to Chris's point, I'm not sure if they can parse this out in a different amount because the statute, I think, I didn't check this before the show, but you get your fine, and then when it's like the first time, then they waive that, right? You get a pardon for it. Then the second time it's 10%, and then it's progressive. So I don't know if they can do that or not, but I was thinking that they would do the 10% thing. Mm-hmm. And then the last thought that I had was way back, and I want to say it's probably 30 years ago, there was a Democrat female from Chicago who had hundreds of campaign finance violations, and they just kept telling her she owed this, she owed this, she owed this, and she was like, nope, I'm not paying it, nope. And really the only teeth that they had was to say, well, if somebody does enough of them and doesn't pay them, then you just don't let them be on the ballot. But I don't think that ever happened, right? So where's the teeth? If you don't, so what if they say it's a $10 million?
There is a law now, Terry, where if you have outstanding fines, you can't get on the ballot. So there is that at some point that was done because that is currently the law.
Oh, but Collin.
But I think that was the law then. They just never did it.
But you can close that committee, and then apparently you just get away with it, right, Chris?
Right, well, no, that's right.
Also, what you can do is you can get removed from the ballot, and then the party can reslate you
But there's no slating now. There's no slating anymore.
Well, no. Okay, for like a state position, but if you're a county board member, if you're a township trustee, and you get removed from the ballot for ballot forfeiture, they just can slate you and put you back on the ballot. This just happened in Will County.
Oh, you know what? I think there's no slating for vacancies, but that would be it. It's an interesting thought. I don't know where that takes you.
Just look it up. All of this just happened in Will County, and what the Democrats did, they just slated the township supervisor.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah,
won the caucus for Joliet Township, got removed from the ballot for ballot forfeiture. They had another caucus, and they replaced the guy who got removed from the ballot for ballot forfeiture with the same guy.
Well, all I can say is this. I love that our audience is pretty high level, because after this discussion is out there, I'm going to get at least 5 texts with a clear explainer on what is and isn't legal. So to our audience, set us right here, because clearly there's some questions. I want to bring us back to just the fine itself. And Terri, I know you had some thoughts on, I think maybe it sounds like we're in agreement, because I said the same thing last week, that as much as I'd love to see Harmon slapped with a $10 million fine, there was no way that was going to happen. But I think a reasonable position is, listen, you skirted the law, you did it on purpose. A $980,000 fine, a 10% of what the original amount was, is a reasonable fine for what you just did. But it looks like that's not even going to happen.
Well, I actually think what I'm saying this because way back when I ran for county board, I had a violation. And so what they do is they send you the letter that says that you are, guilty of this. Your fine is, I think mine was like $1,200. And mine was just a clerical error, but it was still a $1,200 fine, and I had to pay like $120. But the fine was actually $1,200. I just only had to pay this much. So I think his fine would be $10 million, but he would only have to pay 10% or whatever. So I mean, for me, sometimes being in a super duper minority, just the fact that someone is found guilty of something is a win all in itself. I had someone ask me a while back, well, do you think that Madigan will do all of his time? I said, well, it's federal time. I think you got to do 85%. But even if Madigan was found guilty and only had to do a day in prison is prison. And you can take that from me after being, 20 years of working there. So I don't care if you're guilty, you're guilty. And if you're working, if you're in prison, you're in prison. In this case, if Harmon is found guilty and he only has to pay $1 million, then it's still guilty. That precedent is still there, and there were consequences. But so often we just see no one gets consequences. So bad behavior continues, escalated.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, obviously if that were to happen, but either way, I mean, I'd love to see Republicans talking about this more, because the Senate Republican leader, whether you think he's going to get fined or not, the reality is everyone seems to agree that he skirted election law here. We got to talk about that. That's the Democratic leader. I said Republican. That was a faux pas. Senate Democratic leader broke election law willingly here. And I'd love to see some fight out of some the Senate Republicans beyond just some of the caucus members. I'd love to see the full caucus here take this and run with it. Maybe that'll happen after the filing deadline ends, so we can start to see some fight here. All right, let's go to our next topic. Terri, one of the main reasons we wanted you on is veto session next week. For those who've been watching the podcast, that's the second week, the final week of veto session. And if anything is going to happen, it's going to happen next week. So that's where Terri and all the rest of her colleagues are going to be next week, is in Springfield. I know you want to talk first about energy. We'd love to talk about it, because that's going to be a big topic in Springfield. And then before we close, we'll hit some other veto session stuff too and get your thoughts. But let's start it off on energy, because obviously right now what we're seeing is massive energy bills for working families, for manufacturers, for small businesses. We know next June they're going to go up even more. It's a significant problem for the cost of living and the cost of doing business in this state, and it's going to keep getting worse, especially with some of the legislation they're looking to push, which is going to directly add another line item on everybody's energy bills. So Terri, take it away.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right, Collin. It isn't just a problem in Illinois; it's a problem nationally. Because with data centers going in and AI, I went to a conference back in July in Canada, and then followed up with NCSL in Boston. And when they're talking about energy nationally or internationally, they're talking about the fact that data centers and AI are only going to get more efficient. When they say more efficient, they don't mean use less energy. They mean do more and work faster. So the more efficient they become, the more energy they need. And we have,
and probably more water
Maryland
too,
called
right?
Virginia the energy sucker. You need more water as well. So Maryland called Virginia, because that's ComEd, right? Called Virginia the energy sucker of the world. And that's because they have so many data centers there. Well, we want the U.S. to be the lead on data centers and AI. And I want Illinois to be the lead within the country. So we do have to fix some of that. We know that we're going to have nuclear. This energy bill that that the Democrats are trying to make everyone think is going to get our energy costs under control does not get our energy costs under control. In fact, it will increase our energy costs. They keep saying that we as Republicans believe that we need to repeal the moratorium on nuclear for the large scale nuclear facilities. That the Democrats keep saying that this does. We've told them in 2 different hearings that it doesn't. The language is wrong. The language they need is the language that Sue Rezin has, and they have not adopted that language yet. The other thing, there's multiple things that are wrong with this, but one is the Illinois Shines program. So Illinois Shines allows for, say, Collin, you want solar on your house or in your yard, but I don't. Say you make $500,000 a year and I make $50,000. There's no means testing, so you can get Illinois Shines and you're making 10 times more money than I am, but I have to pay for your solar when I don't even want solar. Totally hypothetical there, but so we're going to have that's an increased line item on each person's bill. The nuclear moratorium, there's a whole plethora of other issues that are really wrong in that bill, and it does not help us. Today, I was told the Illinois Manufacturers Association finally came out in opposition of the bill. Oh, nice. We need I think you alluded to this a little bit earlier when you talked about people stepping up and starting to fight. For so long in Springfield, we have seen organizations that actually should be speaking up. Sometimes, the ones I really get angry at sometimes are school superintendents. So they don't want school mandates, but then they don't come to committees, or they don't, oppose the bill. And I'm picking on them right now. But Illinois Manufacturers Association is another one. I love them, and we try to work really well with them, but you got to step up on this stuff and oppose the bill, because otherwise the conversation is only one-sided. And so I think the energy bill, I'm going to keep going until you stop me. But obviously,
well, Terri, let me do that then, because something we've talked about here is the Republican position. This isn't the case on every issue. We got some work to do in our party. I understand this. But when it comes to energy, the Republican position is actually, for most of us, very balanced. We're not against green energy, clean energy. For us, it's simply an all of the above approach. Pritzker keeps pointing to, and his allies keep pointing to Texas. And we say, yes, fine, let's do what Texas is doing. Because Texas has drilling, and they have nuclear, and they have oil, natural gas, and they have, I don't know if they have coal still. I'm not sure about that. But then, yes, they have extensive clean energy with solar, with wind, with anything you could do in the clean energy space. Like with Texas, it's an all of the above approach. And that's the Republican position. We're not against solar. We're not against wind. We're not against this clean energy. The idea, though, is that on our path to a cleaner energy future, we can't just shut down the plants we need that are producing energy, especially when in Illinois, you're talking about coal. We've got some of the cleanest coal generators in the country in Illinois. We've done all this work, and they've done all this work to clean up and reduce their emissions. We should be encouraging that and supporting that. But if you shut them down, then all we end up doing is importing dirty energy from other states. Like if we actually want to do something for the environment, it's an all of the above approach, which is the Republican position. For once, we are the mainstream, reasonable, moderate approach. Meanwhile, it's the Democrats who it's just what the environmentalists want and nothing else. Like that needs to be pointed out more and more.
Well, and there's questions since you mentioned coal, but I want to come back to the oil and gas thing in a minute, because someone is going to have to pick up the phone and educate J.B. Pritzker about oil and gas in Illinois. But when it comes to coal, there are byproducts of coal like gypsum that you have to have for drywall, and you have to have for some of the sulfur items that go on like soybeans and stuff. So you have to have those byproducts. And so far, no one has indicated what we're going to do about when we completely stop having those coal byproducts, what we're going to do to produce drywall. It's why if you go try to do something in your house right now and you need drywall for your house, part of the reason it's so expensive is because all of the states are rolling back their coal production, so the byproducts are not there. But on the oil and gas item, so I represent Mount Vernon, Illinois, which is the oil and gas capital of Illinois. J.B. Pritzker was in Mount Vernon about a month ago for a factory that we put in that was 100% solar. And he made a comment. The folks that own that plant are actually out of Texas. And he said to them, well, we need this solar because we don't have the oil and gas that Texas and Oklahoma had. Now he's standing in Mount Vernon, Illinois, which is the center of Illinois' portion of the Illinois-Indiana oil basin, where we have as much oil and natural gas as North Dakota. So the guy sitting next to me, who's a banker and does a lot of the financing for them, I elbowed him and I said, think you want to talk to the governor just a little bit later and tell him how much oil and gas we have? And how dare he come into the district and be standing on the very, surface of that and act like we don't have any oil and gas here. So there's just so much wrong with that.
At a time when Gavin Newsom signed a bill that increased drilling in California, Tony Evers signed a bill in Wisconsin that increased nuclear generation in Wisconsin. Like there's very few places in this country where Democrats are as far left and extreme on this as in Illinois under J.B. Pritzker. Again, you see Gavin Newsom supporting more drilling. I mean, this is, if you take a minute and educate yourself, the fact that the reason why America has become so much more efficient and so much more clean is because of the move to natural gas. It tremendously reduced our emissions in this country. Like, we are making progress. They don't want to say that. They don't want to let you know that as the public, but we're making tremendous progress in this country. But that's how we're going to do it, is step by step, making that progress. If you just mandate that all this stuff shuts down, that's why our energy bills are going through the roof. It's a supply problem and, yes, a demand problem, but we are exacerbating the supply problem all to chase an agenda instead of just having a common sense approach. All right.
So on nuclear, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to move us to other stuff on veto, but if you've got final thoughts on energy, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the Clinton power plant was built for 2 reactors, and the last time I went there to visit was just early summer. The rebar is still sticking out of the concrete where so coming out of the first reactor building, there's rebar sticking out of that concrete because they intended to put the second reactor there. And then the federal moratorium on nuclear came into play, so they never put the second one there, and they have room for a third one. The time frame is just going to be how long it takes for permitting, and I believe really strongly that the Trump administration is going to pare down that permitting, and then I'm hopeful that they'll also order both Prairie State Energy and then the Springfield coal facility, CWLP, to stay open. That's my hope.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the hope, but and it would be the common sense position. It's just not what we've seen out of the governor in this state. Any final thoughts on veto? I know transit is a thing. I know they want you and Michael to pay a surcharge, to pay a tax so that Brandon Johnson's CTA can get bailed out. Any thoughts on transit or anything else that'll be in veto next week?
Yeah, so there's still that we call it the pizza tax, that delivery tax. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be $1.50 at this point. There was enough pushback on that, but there is still floating around like 30 cents, 50 cents. 1 cent is too much for the whole rest of the state to pay for mass transit for Chicago. Now, I know I'm a deep down stater in this issue, but the fact is you cannot have practically the entire city who gets to ride for free. Like, we were all trying to figure out who does have to pay to ride when you talk about the rides. Yep. So until you start,
look at, CTA, they just were forced by RTA to raise their rates. I think it was the first time since 2017 or 2018 that they've raised their rates. I mean, even just that boggles the mind, because it's like, how much more expensive has the entire world gotten since 2017, 2018, and you've never once raised your rates? I wonder why you're in financial problems right now.
They're raising the rates for the people that are paying, but they still have vast quantities of people who don't pay anything at all because they continue to find giveaway after giveaway after giveaway. And sometimes sometimes there are folks who are able to pay who still are not paying anything because it was a really good thing to push through if you wanted to get a vote or two. So I think, there's every possibility that we'll see something in regard to that. One that I don't even think is on your radar, and I'm not sure that it's going to come up in the legislature, but it's been pretty big for my region. And you're going to laugh about this, I hope. But there was a change made to the duck hunting season. And I swear to you, in the last 2 days, I have gotten more phone calls on the change of the duck hunting season from IDNR than I got on IDES during COVID. So the director of Department of Natural Resources is a very reasonable person to work with, and they're going to revisit that. But y'all don't need to worry about that up north. You guys are okay. Your duck season is good.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
I just want to add something on with the whole transit issue. Is that certainly in agreements with everybody that it does seem to be a statewide bailout of the Chicagoland transit system. But one needs to remember, they're not just bailing on RTA. It's literally just the CTA. Like everyone, yes, is the RTA in financial problems? Sure, but like Metro and Pace are doing okay. All of this is because
Metro was doing okay enough that they were going to shift money over to their capital fund, and they were just told, don't do that. The optics are bad. We've got to make it look like things are bad, especially because they keep shifting money from Pace and Metro over to CTA, which, has not been talked about enough. It's like, okay, great. So, I'm being told that Metro is going to have to cut staff and lines and service times and everything else because money was shifted out of Metro over to CTA. So just to further prove your point, Chris.
And even still, it's not even just all of the CTA that's a problem, because the people who are going to get hurt most, because they're going to keep all the North Shore lines going. We'll make sure all the yuppie neighborhoods can continue to have their 17 stops every mile. But the people who are going to get hurt in the city of Chicago if transit goes under are the working class people of Chicago. So that's what this is all really about. It's the entire state of Illinois who are basically paying so that there's a stop on the red line at both Addison and Sheridan. Like, come on, guys. So that's what I really like to harp on, is that you're not bailing out me, you're bailing out the city of Chicago and a very specific part of
it. Well, and I would add to that when you talk about the downstate transit, it's not a matter of whether you can get picked up on this street or this street. It is, can you get picked up at Hardee's, or do you have to go to the Hardee's in the next town, and you have to call 72 hours in advance to get a transit ride in some parts of this state. And then if you're crossing county lines, you have to call all of the counties that you're crossing 72 hours in advance to get your spot on there. And then you've got to try to make that line up. And if you're at a doctor's visit and you need that transit authority to take you home, I know some people who have gotten dialysis and had to wait 4 hours after their dialysis to be taken home because there was no ride.
We don't think about that or talk about that anywhere near enough. So thanks, Terry. All right, our last topic before we get into our closing topics here is this. So Lane's going to bring up in post a post by the DuPage County Republicans, which was clever and it went viral. And that's the point of social media, right? So this is not to attack this post in any way. But I just want you guys to see it because it's the point of this topic, which is a map of the country from the election results from 2024 and saying, in case you're wondering if Republicans will be holding our own No Kings rally, we held ours last November. It was far more effective than the ones you're seeing today. They posted this past weekend. Funny, clever. I enjoy it. No problems with it. Here's what we need to be thinking about, though, as Republicans, and I'm sad that we lost Batinick on this because I know he talks about this a lot, which is voter enthusiasm. There's a reason why the opposing party typically picks up seats during the midterms based on who's in the White House and who's not. You see an enthusiasm gap typically. And if you're looking at these No Kings rallies and you're making fun of them and you're laughing and you're a Republican, you're having the wrong reaction. Your reaction should be, ooh, we better get our act together. We better get out there and go knock on some doors. We better get out there and go talk to some voters, because whether you want to make fun of them or not, the images from these rallies throughout Illinois, throughout the country, there was massive attendance. Yeah, there were some fake photos. There always is. It's fine. That's not my point. My point here is there is tremendous enthusiasm building on the Democratic side as evidenced by these rallies. Whether you think they're ridiculous or not, the voter enthusiasm on the left is building. And when you look at election results, yes, on affinity, Voters aren't breaking hard towards Democrats because, let's be real, they've gone so far left, they're scaring voters almost as much as Republicans like to scare voters. But propensity, who's going to show up, that is often the problem in midterms. The party that has the White House has lower enthusiasm, lower propensity, because we're like, yeah, we did it. We took the White House. We're good. We're fine. And the other side is all motivated and they go wipe out a bunch of people. If you're looking at these rallies and you're making fun of it and it doesn't spur you to action, you are having the wrong reaction. Tease it, make fun of it, do a viral post like the DuPage County Republicans did. Okay, that's fine. As long as you follow it up with, all right, we're door knocking, who's going to be with me? Because if you let the left continue to build up their enthusiasm, next November, you're going to be looking at some election results that make you want to cry in your whiskey. All right, we've got to have a different reaction here. And if we don't build enthusiasm on our side of the aisle, next November is going to be rough.
I think this is a phenomenal point, Collin. It's something that I've been worried about for a while now, because I've talked about before how part of the the class shift within the two major political parties in this country, where the Republican Party becomes the party of the working class and the Democratic Party becomes the party of of the educated, the postgraduate, and the elite. One of the problems is
the wealthy.
The wealthy pay attention to politics. They do. So we're talking like your upper middle class to upper class suburbanites in DuPage County and northwest suburbs. They're all paying attention to politics. They're all furious with Donald Trump. This is not their person, even though they might have been Republican 5 years ago or 4 years ago, 10 years ago, or last year. Some people in McHenry County apparently still vote Republican primaries and tell me to get off their porch because they'll never sign a petition for a Republican. Sir, you voted Republican. I don't care what I vote. I'm not voting Republican. Doesn't matter. But one of the things Republicans need to worry about is that our voters aren't as tuned into the system as the Democrats are. The Democrats have the media on their side. The Democrats have the vote by mail apparatus, which is continuously making sure that these voters are getting a ballot every single election and that they're turning them in. So Republicans need to find a way around this. Now, this is a big problem if you're a Republican candidate in DuPage County, in Lake County, in the northwest suburbs of Cook County, and McHenry County. Apparently, those middle class suburbs
getting out to DeKalb, even into LaSalle, like this is all the suburbs, Chris, not just northwest.
Well, but especially there. So your problem there is you got to find a way to get your voters out, because you got to find a way to mitigate the Democrats' enthusiasm. If you're a Republican place where we might be trending to the right, Butler's area, my area, Will County, LaSalle County is trending to the right, Collin. So in those areas, you have demographics perhaps on your side, but you still got to put in the work either way. While you're not going to have as much of an enthusiastic Democratic base maybe coming out, you still got to turn your people out, okay? So you cannot rely, as Republicans do year after year. I hear it. The voters are waking up, guys. The Democrats have gone too far this time. But no, the reality of the situation is that the Democratic Party has a extremely radicalized base of educated suburbanites who are going to show up because Orange Man bad. So you need to make sure your people who like the Orange Man, that they show up. You need to knock on doors, educate voters, persuade the independents to vote for your ticket. Because if you don't, you're going to have the wall of your crazy blue-haired suburban women that we always like to joke about, but they're going to vote, and you're not so sure the construction worker who works down the street is going to vote. Remember,
and the enthusiasm gap, I've seen it just in a lot of these candidates trying to get help passing their petitions. There's a lot of great Republicans, great conservatives out there who are passing. So thank you for all your hard work. But the numbers overall, let me just give you some context. Every election, we're seeing that go down. I'm hearing reports all over the state. This is the worst that they've ever seen in terms of Republicans getting out there and passing petitions. Again, that's not a blanket statement. There's lots of great Republicans in the state. But as a totality, overall, the numbers are down. Again, these should be scary if you're watching this. We've got work to do on the Republican side. And we're good? We covered it? It's already...
Well, I just think that, if you're an operative, if you're a candidate, if you're a county GOP, this is something that you need to be thinking about. Those voters that are, lower propensity that maybe showed up in 24 but didn't show up in 22, those are very easily identifiable, right? You just look at the voting record. So start pulling those lists, start making a plan to do outreach to those people, whether it's, knocking on their door, doing a text message, calling them, all of the above. But we have to have a plan to get these people out. And I do think that, you look at some of these petition numbers as they come in. If you're on the inside of one of these statewide campaigns and you're seeing, the numbers that come out of certain counties, you can see where there is enthusiasm and you can see where there isn't. And that's something, if you're running statewide, you need to be kind of using as a metric, not, the only thing, but it does tell a story.
Yeah.
And by the way, all the stuff Butler just said, phenomenal idea. You should have started doing that after everybody got smoked in the municipal cycle. That should have been the canary in the coal mine for a lot of the organizations in the state. I've been saying it for months. I've been telling organizations to do this for months. I told them to do this after 2022. I told them to do this after 2024. I'm still hearing a lot of people saying, we have a plan. We're paying our consultant $100,000 to put a plan together for us. I just gave you the plan. Michael Butler just gave you the plan for free. Hold the damn list of those voters and send your precinct captains and precinct command and go knock the damn doors. There's your plan for free. You're not going to get an invoice.
Chris, we do tend to, as a party, go chasing the next plan instead of realizing the only thing you need to do is go work. Put in the work. Go chase your next plan that looks so great on paper. That's fine. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's get off your butts and go put in the work. Otherwise, we're going to lose. That's it. All right, let's go to our news you can use section. We go through this decently quickly. This is the stuff, as you, our audience, should be aware of that's in the news that maybe you didn't hear of, maybe you didn't, but you ought to be using this. You ought to be putting this out. So I'll go through these handful of items, and if you have thoughts, panel, feel free to jump in at the end of each one. First one here is Democrats have been regularly admitting that they are extending this shutdown for political reasons, but it came out this last week that specifically, especially after the No Kings protest, that they are afraid of their base, and that's part of why they're not voting to reopen the government. Here's a couple quotes from an article in The Hill. People are going to get hammered if they vote to reopen the government, said one Democratic senator. Another one said this: we would have enough votes to reopen the government if people were not terrified of getting the guillotine. This is from Democratic U.S. senators who are admitting that it's because of their base that's so angry about Trump and Republicans. That's why they're keeping this, the government shut down. That's why, by the way, you saw on Thursday, a second vote was taken in the U.S. Senate to pay our essential workers, especially the members of the military and our federal law enforcement. And for a second time in 2 weeks, Democrats voted that down and stopped that from happening. You guys, as our audience, you've got to be talking about this. We said this last week, that the shutdown is a PR battle. That's what it is. And if we are not talking about how this is the Democrats' fault and pointing that out, then they'll win that PR battle, and they'll continue the shutdown, by the way. And maybe they win and get their $1.5 trillion of additional spending. You've got to be talking about this. I'm on Facebook and nobody's talking about this. I'm on Twitter and nobody is sort of regular Republicans are talking about this. You've got to point to these quotes from Democrats that they are choosing to keep the government shut down for political leverage. Our service members aren't getting paid. Farmers are finally now getting some of their aid, but they were having trouble getting some of their aid at a time when they need it, especially soybean farmers and others. You see SNAP funding is going to be out in a week because Democrats keep this government shut down. You've got to be pointing this out regularly. Otherwise, we're going to lose this fight, guys. You got to get on the battlefield.
Well, one of the quotes that I saw this week that really stood out to me was from Catherine Clark. She's the whip for the Democrats in the House, and she was doing an interview and was asked about the shutdown and said, of course there will be families that are going to suffer, but it is one of the few leverage times that we have. So they're leveraging the suffering of American, hardworking American families, our military, veterans, etc., to score political points. And it's just going to continue. Like Chuck Schumer said, every day gets better for the Democratic Party as the shutdown goes on. Well, tell that to the families that are trying to figure out how they're going to pay their mortgage.
100%. All right, next one here. So there's a supervisor who was put on paid leave, by the way, while getting investigated, and it was found that that there was proof of these allegations that were made about this against the supervisor for a toxic work environment, bullying and verbal abuse, favoritism, unsafe working conditions, retaliation, punitive job assignments, sexual harassments, profanity and lewd assaults, insults, misuse of employee labor, a climate of fear. And then what happens in Pritzker's IDOT? As soon as the investigation is done, they get a slap on the wrist. I think it was 20 days that they were for unpaid. Then they're put right back into their position, their supervisor position. We have stories about this week after week after week in Pritzker's Illinois, where as he's chasing his national ambitions, the administration, that he's supposedly such a great administrator, and yet every week we've got stories of problems like this. This is probably the first week in a while we haven't talked about IDOC, and of course we've got Terri here. I wish we had you previous weeks, but we see this over and over, Terri, and I know you've spoken out about it at nauseum, but Pritzker is not an active leader in this state. He's not running these departments. This individual should not be back in a supervisor position. As a result, these people who put in their complaints left. We've heard over and over about how we're struggling with not having enough employees in the state. Well, here's, I think, 7 of them who all left because this guy's back in control. I'll use his name, Mike Turner. He's back in a supervisorial position after all of this. Like, this should not be happening, but in Pritzker's Illinois, it happens all the time.
I'm going to say, because you're talking about these high-ranking people, there was an email that went out this week about SNAP benefits signed by the director of Department of Human Services, Dulce Quintero, that said that no SNAP benefits were going to go out unless the Republican shutdown ended. That's an ethics violation. So you have a director of a state agency who is saying that the federal shutdown is a Republican federal shutdown. So that actually crosses over like 3 things that you just talked about. A state agency, whether it's Republican or Democrat fault, and in this case, it's an ethics violation.
Well, let's go to our next one here. One of Pritzker's favorite companies in Illinois, because he favors those companies who support him, and then all the rest of us are on our own. Rivian is facing some scrutiny here, rightfully so. So kudos to WGLT for putting this out. Rivian is refusing to say how many people work at the normal plant, and they've been refusing to release this, and now we're learning why. They've taken millions of dollars in tax breaks, and they've got more coming, by the way, in the coming years, where they're going to be eligible for even more tax breaks. At a point, they had 8,500 employees, 8,600 employees was the last time they reported to the state. When they're asked how many people they have, I think the local mayor said, I think it's about 8,000. Others have said about 8,500. But then when you actually dig into the numbers, it turns out that the last time that they actually talked about their numbers, they had 7,400 statewide. So the question is, where'd that other 1,000 go? But it's even worse than that, because if you look at if you dig even further in the numbers, there's estimates that they may have only as many as 5,000 now in normal. So how did they go from 8,000, 8,500 all the way down to 5,000? That's thousands of jobs that have disappeared. And by the way, no one was ever notified. You're supposed to notify the state if you've got that kind of a cut. How did they get away with not notifying the public that they were making those kind of cuts? And we just saw this week that Rivian's cutting their workforce 4% nationwide. So they've got another plant in Georgia. Are they moving people over to Georgia? I don't know, because they're not reporting it. And of course, because they're one of Pritzker's favored companies, we may never know. But questions need to be asked here. It's one of the biggest employers in the Normal area, the Bloomington Normal area. And just because, they're one of Pritzker's pet companies doesn't mean they shouldn't be held to scrutiny. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked here and answered. All right, next one to talk about. Lane's going to bring this up on screen. There was a study done on the fastest growing states in America. Of course, Illinois is not going to show up on that one. But that study tested or talked about where states would be in 2050 based on that study over the next 25 years. And wouldn't you know it, Illinois is number 1 in the number of residents we are projected to lose. We are projected to lose 1.1 million residents. While other states are gaining residents, we're going to lose 1.1 million residents. That's estimated, of course, but based on what we're seeing, it's probably not that far off. An 8% decrease in our population, which by percentage is the 4th worst in the country, but 1st worst in total residents that will be lost here in Illinois. And as you see this, Lane will bring it up again. As you look at this map, we always hear, everyone's leaving the Midwest. But you know what? Look at Minnesota, doing just fine. Look at Iowa, doing just fine, doing pretty good. Wisconsin even is doing okay. Some of these states are projected to lose a couple percent, but not 8%, not 1.1 million residents. That is an indictment of Illinois in the direction that we are headed. And you think about all the long-term problems that's going to lead to our state, 1.1 million fewer people, fewer taxpayers. It's going to be the rest of us that are left holding the bag paying all those taxes. This is a problem we should be talking about. All right. Everybody just lets it stand. No thoughts. All right. I'll move on to the next one here. Let's talk health insurance. This is a key part of the cost of living equation for average families. And it was reported this week that the average cost of a family's health insurance is now nearly $27,000. You heard that right. The average cost of health insurance for the average working family right now is $27,000. And I can tell you it's real. We just saw premium increases of 15% in our company for us and for our employees. Like, this is a problem, and people are getting their notices now. Republicans should be talking about health insurance and the costs of health insurance now, because working families are being buried by healthcare costs. And when Democrats talk about how they want to help working families, it isn't middle-class families that they're talking about. It's the middle-class families that are getting buried by these policies, and we Republicans need to be pointing it out and talking about it. Stop being so focused on maybe just taxes. The equation's bigger than that. Healthcare is getting completely unaffordable for the average working family, and we Republicans ought to be talking about it all day, every day, especially now, because if they're opening up these notices and learning how much more they're going to pay next year, wouldn't it be nice to have some Republican immediately follow up and say, hey, guess what? That's because of Democratic policies. Let me tell you what we're going to do to fix it. Wouldn't that be nice if we actually dovetailed off of a problem like this and talked about how we as Republicans have a plan to lower healthcare costs? It'd be nice to actually hear a Republican talk about that. All right. Got to keep the cigar lit since I'm the only one talking here. Last one, and then we'll get to our clowns and OGs of the week. This is one that's a cautionary tale. In this last week, a Quinnipiac poll, I butchered it. Sorry, I'm moving on. I don't care. A poll came out this week that showed Donald Trump's approval rating in the economy is the lowest it's been in either his first or second terms. This is important because one of the reasons Trump won was because of how he had high favorability on the economy. Now only 38% of the public approve of his handling of the economy, while 50% disapprove. Now, obviously, we hear repeatedly from Republicans in D.C., from the White House, we've got time, let them cook, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. But guess what? The next election's a year away. This is not going to work. If Republicans are facing headwinds on the economy at the ballot box, we are absolutely screwed. Something has got to break here. Something's got to change. And this is sort of a plea to the White House to let's improve this. We got to get moving on this. And it's just a warning to Republicans. Don't rest on your laurels. If you think Republicans or voters are going to vote Republican because of our handling of the economy, right now, that's not what the data says. So don't just lean on that. You better be out there talking about what you're going to do better to improve the economy, because right now, we ain't winning this fight, this PR battle, and it's going to hurt us at the ballot box if we don't turn that around.
I think one of the issues is that the president made it seem very simple to fix the economy. All you have to do is get him elected, and suddenly everything was going to be great. It's almost as though this country's economic problems are much more difficult than that. You can't just turn on the tariff switch and everything's going to come back normal. And that's being said as something who supports tariffs. I think there's a lot of things that we need to do in this economy that are going to, that would need to happen in order for us to get back to number one economy in the world status again. But I think that's one of the problems, but I definitely agree with you 100%, Collin, that at least the messaging has to get better if we want to have a chance next year.
All right, let's go to our last segment here, OG Clown of the Week. Terry, I know you've got a hard stop time in a couple minutes, so if you've got any thoughts here, feel free to share first, and then if you've got to go, we really respect your time, so go ahead.
Yeah, it's well, so for OG, I want to just say a gentleman that I knew for many years who I absolutely could not have gotten elected to the legislature without was Richard Stubblefield. Richard passed just a couple weeks ago. His funeral was last week, week and a half ago, but I haven't been on the show for a little bit. Richard was the government teacher at Mount Vernon High School. He was instrumental in almost every elected official in Jefferson County went through his class, and I would say they almost all would credit him with that. So that's my OG. My clown of the week is going to be the director of DHS. I mean, not only did she falsely state that it's a Republican issue, but she also, I believe, violated ethics law. So we'll see what the Inspector General says about it.
Yeah, and if you want to hear more about Terry's thoughts on that was back on a previous topic where we covered that. Which remind me, somebody, which topic was that Terry, you brought that up?
I don't remember what we were talking about. I slid it in on something else probably.
We've covered Veto, I think, or was it?
I mean, I'm really annoyed about it.
Oh, I think it was during the John Harmon conversation. So you can go back to that.
Well, it's it was a SNAP on the SNAP issue. So she sent out a letter saying that people will not get their SNAP benefits in November unless the Republican shutdown ends.
Yeah.
So I thought it was not just inappropriate. I think it's unethical.
All right. Well, I know you got to go. Thank you, Terri, for being with us.
Thank you.
We always love having you. Thanks for being here. Chris, Michael, your thoughts. You guys got anybody this week?
Yeah, on clowns. I saw a kind of statement that was released by the organizers of these No King protests that are happening across the country, and then, they're happening in other countries as well. And they said that at certain locations, they're not going to call it a No Kings protest anymore. They're going to call it No Tyrants because they didn't want to offend actual kings because some of these countries have them. And they're also not going to use the phrase no crowns because that might offend, actual royalty. So they're changing it to no clowns instead. So it's like these guys just can't get out of their own way.
What else you guys got?
So for me, I have one OG of the week. That's the Will County Board GOP caucus, along with one Democrat. They voted this week to reject a 2% levy increase for next year's tax season by the county board. They had one Democrat who joined in with them to make it a 12-10 vote. So the Will County Democrats are going to have to scramble to try and get that one Democrat back on board, or else they're going to have to, actually have to start cutting spending increases from their budget. I know it's a very complicated issue. Sometimes maybe you shouldn't increase spending all across the board. Maybe you shouldn't do some things. But it's something that the Will County Democrats might have to do. So I shout out to Will County Board GOP for another victory on their end. I have 3 clowns this week. The first clown is every campaign for governor. This has been ridiculous so far. You have made my life a living hell. We have, lawsuits being leaked, 21-year-olds shaking down billionaires. What's going on here, folks? Will somebody serious enter the room, please? Number 2 is Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh, who, again, 15 years ago was a far-right Tea Party member of Congress. He just endorsed Kevin Morrison for Congress in the 8th Congressional District. This guy said that there needed to be an armed uprising if Trump lost the 2016 presidential election, and now he's just grifting his way and being a far-left radical Democrat because Trump bad. Joe Walsh, you are a clown of the week. And my main clown of the week is Graham Plattner, who is a candidate for Senate in the state of Maine. He's had 2 big scandals over the past week. The first one is he had some Reddit comments. Of course, he's using Reddit. He's a Democrat after all. He's had some Reddit comments come up from his past where he was claiming to be a communist, arguing for violence against conservatives, saying all conservatives were morons, diminishing, sexual assault. Very strange stuff that he's had to answer for in the last week. And now, in addition, he's had to answer for the fact that he somehow managed to get a Nazi tattoo on his chest when he was in the military. Now, he claims he had no idea it was a Nazi symbol. He just happened to be drunk in Croatia and thought it was a funny idea to get the skull and bones cross tattooed on his chest. And he just only recently realized that it was a neo-Nazi symbol. So he obviously got flack because this guy's pretending to be some far-left progressive, and he's got a Nazi symbol on his chest. So this guy just has scandal after scandal after scandal, and credit to the sinister men behind the curtain of the Democratic Senate campaigns are finding all this Apple research and trying to get this guy out of the race early because they've done a really good job so far of that. So shout out to them. And Graham Plattner, you are the clown of the week. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I got an OG finally. I haven't had an OG in a while, it seems like, but my OG is Trump in the White House for following through on their promise to work to expand access to IVF and deliver on a major campaign promise. There's still work to be done here, but he made a few moves this week to lower costs for IVF with insurance guidance, with a drug agreement. Anybody who's been through this knows that it's an incredibly expensive process, and Trump and some Republicans like me have called for Republicans to be active on this and help lower these costs, and Trump is taking some steps. Again, more work to be done, but finally some movement here. I'm excited to see it. And by the way, because I've been a vocal Republican on this. Anytime that Democrats put out something about IVF and say Republicans are bad or Trump is bad, I have multiple media members like, hey, you want to comment? You want to comment? Then when Trump finally does something here about it and it's a positive on the Republican side, 0 members of the media have contacted me asking if I want to comment on it, which is just so frustrating. But I'm commenting here that, look, it's a Republican who was leading on IVF because Republicans are the pro-life party and the pro-family party. And look, we're actually doing something about it. I don't love that it took until October, but listen, it's progress. I'm going to take it. I'm going to smile about it. Clowns of the week, I've cut it down just to 5, but you notice we didn't talk immigration this week because frankly, I'm just sick of it being our headliner every week. But I do need to point out over the last week some violence that's happened here because it is still happening. Just because we didn't talk about it doesn't mean it's not continuing here. You have Andrew Stanton, a Democrat from Kenosha, Wisconsin on TikTok, who was arrested and charged with multiple felonies because he threatened the lives of ICE agents and said they should be shot, and literally said this: when y'all's bodies lay motionless on the ground, ice patch facing up to the sky, we're going to loot your corpses. I can't wait to see those videos. Just awful, awful stuff. We saw immigration agents attacked by 2 females during an arrest in Illinois. And then there was somebody at the No Kings rally in Chicago who literally urged people to grab guns and shoot ICE agents. This guy, Moises Bernal, is an employee of Wilbur Wright College in Chicago. And he said this: you got to grab a gun. We got to turn around the guns on his fascist system. These ICE agents got to get shot and wiped out. So yes, there are still threats of violence from the left on this. We just didn't choose to make it a topic this week, but I'm sure we'll be back at it next week. The Hazel Crest School Board is in my list here for spending nearly $100,000 on food and hotel over the last year and a half for a whole bunch of junkets and retreats and team building and all that BS. Listen, I've been one of those vocal people in support of good school districts, but that comes with pointing out the ones that are bad, and spending $100,000 of taxpayer money so school board members could go gallivant around the state and around the country and have some fun is not an appropriate use of taxpayer funding, nor is spending almost $90,000 on a truck that's used by the board president. Yeah, that ain't going to work, guys. Next one here, go to DuPage County. We've talked several times about how the fight between the DuPage County clerk and the Democratic chairwoman and multiple members of the board is leading to huge expenditures for county taxpayers of their tax dollars. We now have a number, thanks to Cindy Cronin Cahill and Jim Zay and some other Republicans, Carrie Galassi, who've brought this to light and have pushed on this. We now know $161,500 have been wasted on this fight between Democrats at the DuPage County board level. And we've been told more to come. This isn't the end. There's still plenty more spending to come. Those are all your tax dollars, DuPage County residents, that are being wasted by this clown show that is the Democratic Party control of DuPage County government. Maybe y'all should get out there and do something about it and elect some Republicans and change things in DuPage County. Second to last one here is just kind of the ridiculousness of the fight between Brandon Johnson and state Democrats, because Brandon Johnson wants to raise taxes on sports wagering, sports betting, and state Democrats are like, oh, no, that's our money. You can't do that. You can't do that. So now they're looking to change the law, adjust a bill down in Springfield, like Curtis Tarver, Dan Dietich, and some others. They're like, no, you can't take our state revenue at the county. So now we got to lock that down. It's just watching Democrats fight over who gets to take our tax dollars versus who doesn't get to take our tax dollars. It's a little funny, but also a little painful because, we're paying that bill. Final one here. I'm sure I'll get some grief for this, but I got to talk about it. In a Chicago Tribune article, they were quoting several individuals about, complaining because there's so much infighting in the Republican Party. And the person who got the final quote in that article is Scott Kaspar, who said, the infighting is a sad testament of the state of the Illinois Republican Party. It's a very fractured party. Listen, I don't deny that anybody has the right to do what they want. He's got the Illinois Review blog is his and a few others, and they're constantly bashing Republicans on that blog. It's basically all they do on that blog. And he's in there in the Chicago Tribune saying, oh, it's so bad that we infight so much. Pick a lane. If you want to be the one that sort of calls out the problems of the Republican Party, great. But then don't go to the Tribune and be like, look, I'm not participating in this. You're leading some of it. Come on. If I'm going to call out hypocrisy on the left, I got to call it out on the right. So I call it out here. All right, closing thoughts. We obviously had 2 guests this week that had a lot to get to, so we've lost them along the way. But Michael and Chris, you guys are the last 2 standing. I think Chris got the last. Who's got the last word last time? Wasn't it you, Chris?
I believe it was, yes.
Yeah. So all right, Chris, go ahead, and we'll let Michael go last.
Look, to everybody out there, right now, politics is nuts. Okay, between getting petitions together And between all the drama that's happening in the governor's race, it's seamlessly going nowhere. A lot of this can be very overwhelming. It's overwhelming on me sometimes. I know it's overwhelming on a lot of you. After petitions get filed, you got to run through that petition, but after petitions get filed, make sure everyone takes a breather. Even during this time, when you finally get a chance to sit on your couch for 5 seconds, take a breather, take care of yourself, because there's no sense in ruining your life or ruining your home life over politics and petitions and all this nonsense. Take a breather and remember what this is all really about. It's not just about getting some jamoke elected to some office or getting him on the ballot. It's about actually making life a little bit better for you and me and for our neighbors in the state of Illinois and the country and the world. So remember that and take some time to breathe and enjoy life. Thank you.
Michael, your final thoughts.
We're light at the end of the tunnel on these petitions. If you're still keep circulating, keep in contact with these candidates, make sure that they have those sheets. And like Chris said, once we get through petition filing and, fingers crossed, no serious objections, take a breather because we all deserve it.
All right. Well, we've gone long this week. And by the way, we didn't even get to everything. This was a packed week of developments in Illinois politics. So for those in our audience, thank you for sticking with us. To our 2 special guests this week, Terri Bryant, Mark Batinick, thank you guys for being with us as long as you could. Thank you, I guess, to Michael and Chris, but you guys have to do it. So what are you going to do? But thank you guys for sticking with us on this dumb old podcast. We'll be back in your inboxes next week. I'm sure it'll be a lot about veto sessions. So watch your wallets. We'll see what happens down in Springfield next week, and we'll catch you on the smoke-filled room. See you guys soon.